It was just past 9 on a Tuesday night when I noticed something strange in the bathroom. I had just finished flossing, toothbrush still foamy in my mouth, when I caught a tiny red glimmer in the mirror. It was faint, pulsing almost like the flicker of a dying LED. I leaned in, squinting at the air vent above the shower. For a second, I thought I was imagining things. But the light blinked again. I stood still, heart knocking hard against my ribs. That can't be what I think it is, right? Grabbing the step stool from the closet, I climbed up to the vent and tilted my head, staring through the narrow slats. And that's when my stomach dropped. There, tucked just out of sight behind the metal grill, was a tiny black camera. Sleek, modern, warm to the touch when I reached up and yanked it out. There was no doubt. Someone had been watching me in my own bathroom. I stood frozen in place for a long moment, the camera still in my hand. Everything started clicking together, a weird routine inspection from the HOA rep a few days earlier. The questions that didn't make sense, her smug little smirk when she left without so much as a goodbye. She'd made a show of looking official, clipboard clutched tightly, like she was holding a national security file. Only one person in this neighborhood would be both bold and bizarre enough to try something like this. Marge Renshaw. Marge had been the self-appointed president of our HOA for the last 4 years, elected once, then somehow never stepping down. She had a reputation. The kind of person who measured lawns with a ruler, who fined kids for chalk drawings, who once threatened to evict a neighbor over decorative garden gnomes. She'd hit me with a citation last year for using the wrong shade of beige on my window trim, even though it matched the original swatch. But this? Installing a hidden surveillance camera in someone's bathroom? That was beyond anything I could have imagined. Let me rewind. It all began last Thursday. I was out front trimming the hedges, earbuds in, singing off-key to Earth, Wind, and Fire. I was halfway through belting out Badia when I saw her, Marge, storming across the street like a pastel polo-clad tornado, armed as always with her death clipboard. She didn't wave. She never did. Just came to a full stop on the edge of my lawn and cleared her throat with the force of a car engine dying in winter. "We've received anonymous complaints," she announced, "about unauthorized plumbing enhancements on this property." I pulled out one earbud. "Plumbing enhancements?" She nodded solemnly, eyes scanning my face like she was waiting for a confession. A neighbor reported seeing a delivery addressed to this home, labeled European Water Enhancement Device. It took me a second to realize what she meant. "You mean my bidet?" She didn't flinch. "That would qualify as a water alteration requiring HOA pre-clearance." I blinked. "It's a bidet, not a swimming pool." "I'm a certified HOA hygiene compliance officer," she said, as if that meant anything. She definitely made that title up on the spot. Before I could stop her, she marched straight into my house. "I'll need to inspect for code violations," she called behind her like this was totally normal. I stood there, stunned, but followed more out of disbelief than anything else. She beelined for the guest bathroom, where I'd installed the bidet, poking at the walls, lifting towels, tapping tiles with the end of her pen. At one point, she lingered by the air vent above the toilet, staring a little too long. Then, without another word, she left. No explanation. No citation. Just a smug smile and a remark about documenting findings. At the time, I wrote it off as another one of Marge's absurd power trips. I didn't think twice about the vent. Not until I saw that blinking light tonight. I called the police. They arrived within the hour. I handed them the camera and explained everything: how Marge had forced her way into my home, how she'd fixated on the vent, how I found the device. They didn't laugh. In fact, the officer's expression hardened as he examined the camera. "This model's recent," he said. "Wi-Fi enabled. Real-time streaming. Someone's been watching, not just recording." They took the camera as evidence. I gave them the footage from my doorbell cam that showed her entering my house. That alone was enough to get things rolling. Turns out, this wasn't her first offense. When they executed a search warrant on Marge's home, they found a second monitor hidden in a filing cabinet in her study. Not just for Med here were timestamps and footage of other neighbors' homes, too. Some were completely unaware she'd ever even visited. The fallout was swift. She was arrested on charges of felony invasion of privacy, unlawful surveillance, and trespassing. The court set bail at $50,000, and for once, nobody in the neighborhood rallied to defend her. If anything, people seemed relieved. The HOA called an emergency meeting the following weekend. It was the most crowded I'd ever seen the clubhouse. People who normally ignored HOA emails showed up early, arms crossed, jaws tight. By unanimous vote, Marge was stripped of her role. Effective immediately, she was fined $5,000 and banned from setting foot on any neighbor's property for a full year. Some folks wanted her removed from the neighborhood entirely. But that'll be up to the civil suits that are sure to come next. As for me, I had the vents sealed and replaced, added a new privacy latch to the bathroom door, and installed my own camera system pointed only outside, of course. And the bidet still works like a charm. Every time I use it now, I can't help but smile just a little. Because sometimes justice isn't just poetic, it's perfectly pressurized. And while the legal process churned on, the neighborhood slowly started breathing again. For weeks, every porch discussion and dog-walking chat was filled with stories, little anecdotes people had held back until now. Like how Marge once threatened a 10-year-old boy with a fine for skateboarding too loudly. Or how she claimed humming wind chimes violated the auditory tranquility clause, a rule nobody had ever seen in writing. But what truly struck everyone was just how far she'd gone in her pursuit of control. It wasn't about rules. It wasn't about the HOA. It was about power, and for the first time in years, that power was gone. I started noticing changes right away. Neighbors who used to avoid each other now waved across driveways. Sidewalk chalk art reappeared like wildflowers after winter. Someone even organized a weekend block party, complete with food trucks, a jazz quartet, and a burn-the-clipboard ceremony featuring a papier-mâché effigy of Marge's infamous notebook. At that party, I met a lot of folks I hadn't properly talked to before, like Olivia from 2 doors down, who'd been fined for having a welcome mat with too bold of a font, or Mr. DeWitt, the quiet veteran who'd once been accused of excessive sitting on his porch swing. We laughed, shared stories, and drank cheap lemonade like old friends. But not everyone was over it. About a month later, I received a letter. Not from Marge herself, she was on house arrest and forbidden from contacting neighbors, but from her attorney. It was a cease and desist, claiming I had defamed her by reporting the camera. I handed it straight to my lawyer, who chuckled as he fed it into a shredder. Public record spoke for itself. Still, part of me couldn't let it go. I started wondering what drove someone to do something that twisted. I mean, it's one thing to obsess over lawn edges. It's another to secretly install surveillance equipment in your neighbor's home. So I did some digging. Turns out, Marge hadn't always been this way. Back before she moved to Willow Brook Ridge, she was a middle school administrator. Strict, yes, but apparently respected. Her downfall came after a string of parental complaints about overreach, confiscating cell phones indefinitely, canceling field trips for minor rule infractions. Eventually, a lawsuit involving student privacy forced her resignation. When she moved here, she reinvented herself in the only way she knew how: rule enforcement. And the HOA? It became her new empire. Not that it excused anything, but it did explain the obsessiveness, the control, the need to monitor, judge, punish. She'd traded the school bell for a clipboard, students for neighbors. Where her trial began, I testified. So did 3 others. The courtroom was sterile and quiet, but I could feel the tension in every word. The prosecutor laid out the facts: plainly unauthorized entry, hidden recording device, violation of privacy. Marge sat stone-faced, lips tight, her expression unreadable. When the verdict came down guilty on all 3 charges, there was a ripple through the crowd. Relief, vindication, maybe even a little pity. She was sentenced to 18 months probation, mandatory psychological counseling, and a restraining order from all HOA activity indefinitely. Her property was placed on the market the following week. She never came back. The new HOA president, a retired nurse named Alma Fitzgerald, was unanimously elected. She brought snacks to the first meeting, abolished 12 outdated rules, and created a neighborhood task force to focus on real issues, things like potholes, lighting, and helping the elderly with lawn maintenance. Imagine that. An HOA that actually helped people. As for me, I kept my head down for a while, enjoying the calm. It's funny how quickly peace returns when fear is removed. The camera incident became something of a local legend, like a bad memory that grew more ridiculous with time. But every once in a while, I still look up at that vent. Not out of fear, just as a reminder of what happens when you let someone's ego grow unchecked, of how systems can twist into weapons in the wrong hands, and of how important it is to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Because the truth is, if I hadn't spotted that blinking light, if I hadn't stood on that toilet and looked closer, she might still be watching. And I might still be unaware. But I saw it. I acted. And now, our neighborhood gets to be what it was always meant to be, a place where people live, not just obey. So now when I brush my teeth, I take a second longer to glance at the ceiling. Not because I expect anything, but because I remember. And sometimes, remembering is what keeps us safe.